In this video, I'm going to show you the top picks for college football Week 2, 2025, the top favorites and the top underdogs based on a purely mathematical approach, based on how well teams cover the point spread in Week 1. I then used that information to make adjustments to find the point spreads that were most off. First, I'm going to show you my spreadsheet for the favorites, and then I'll show you the spreadsheets for the underdogs, and I'll explain to you my methodology as I go through the spreadsheets. And both spreadsheets will be shareable or shared in the description box below. First, let's look at the favorites. So in this spreadsheet, if you look on the right side, I have the favorites listed and the actual point spreads right next to them. The green teams are the ones playing at home, and the blue teams are the teams that are on the road. So these are all favorites. Now if you look a little to the left, you'll see a column that says total ADJ. That refers to the total adjustment. And this is based on how well or poorly a team covered the point spread in the previous week, in Week 1. So this is Week 2, looking at Week 1. So USC is playing Georgia Southern. And Georgia Southern failed to cover the point spread by minus 26.5 points. USC covered the point spread by 23.5 points. By combining these two adjustments, you get a total adjustment of minus 50. USC's original point spread's minus 28.5. If you adjust by 50 points, the true point spread theoretically is minus 78.5. The point is, based on the previous week's covering of the point spread of the two teams in this matchup, USC should hypothetically, theoretically, win by 78.5 points. The point is they should cover the point spread by minus 28.5. So what I did was I sorted these teams based on the total adjustment. So USC's matchup is an adjustment of minus 50. San Diego State is minus 35. Wisconsin's minus 34. Maryland's minus 30. So these teams at the top here are teams that are covered the point spread, or teams based on the previous week's covering the point spread information. The adjustment to this week's point spread should be 2 touchdowns or more. Again, this spreadsheet is for the favorites, and there is a shared link in the description box below. Next, what I'm going to do is show you the underdog spreadsheet. This is a little bit more complicated. So on the right side, you see the underdogs. Again, in this column, these are the total adjustments. And these total adjustments is combining the adjustment for both teams in the matchup based on how well they cover the point spread the previous week. So UNLV is playing UCLA. In the previous week, UCLA underperformed by 26.5 points based on the point spread. UNLV outperformed or overperformed the point spread by 8.5 points. Combining these two adjustments, you get a total of 35.5. So I sorted this spreadsheet of underdogs based on the total adjustment. So the UNLV matchup has the highest adjustment. Virginia has an adjustment of 34. Kennesaw State has an adjustment of 28. These teams in the top have total adjustments of 2 touchdowns or more. Okay, so what I have here in this column is the list of all the underdogs projected to cover the point spread based on this one single mathematical criteria, which is covering the point spread in Week 1. Now there's an additional column here that I don't have in the favorites. is the bonus is if the underdogs win, because if you do a money line bet, you get multiples of your original investment. So in this column are the ones where the teams are projected to win based on the adjustment. So how do I know? How can I tell based on the spreadsheet whether the underdog is going to win? So if you see here for Kennesaw State, I calculate a new point spread. So the original point spread was minus 36.5 for Indiana. The new point spread is still Indiana minus 8.5 after adjustments. That means Kennesaw State is still not projected to win. However, let's look at Virginia. Originally, it should have been North Carolina State minus 2.5. But with the adjustments, it flips to a positive. So whenever in this column, the new point spread flips from a negative to a positive, that means the underdog is projected to win. So for example, in the first matchup, UCLA is actually the favorite, minus 2.5, but with an adjustment of 35, the new point spread is 32.5. It flips from negative to positive, which means the underdog is favored to win. So in this column here, I list all situations where the new point spread flip from negative to positive. And that corresponds to the green numbers in this column. So again, these spreadsheets are both linked in the description box below, and they're shared with anybody who has access, who clicks onto the links. So there's no restrictions to that links, and then you can play around with this. So several caveats. One is technically in week 1, some of the teams played 2 games. For example, UNLV played 2 games. Hawaii played 2 games. So what I did there was I looked at the 2 games and I picked the game that was most representative. For example, if one of the games was against an FCS team, I gave that less weight. Also, if there was 2 games against 2 FBS teams, then I would pick the more recent one. One of the teams, Fresno State, I couldn't figure out what to make of it, so I didn't include that in the calculations. Another caveat too is with college football, I've seen some of the teams with that have already played 2 games in technically the first week. There can be large swings in the covering of the point spread by the teams. So the nature of college football is week to week. Sometimes you see huge fluctuations in the performance of the teams. You see a little bit less of that in NFL football. So you have to consider that in terms of the volatility. That's why I would focus on the teams with the largest adjustments. For example, here, Virginia and UNLV, their adjustments are 34 and 35. That's like 5 touchdowns in terms of difference. In addition, once you've so this is a filtering process. It goes through rounds. So in the first round, I was saying, all right, so I found matchups that I like, okay, or that I want to research some more. Then you go in and look at how the teams performed, in that against like what you want to look at. What team did they play the previous week? So let's say there's a huge adjustment, but the team that you're looking at played against an FCS team. Then I would actually be careful with that particular data point. But let's say a team covered the point spread against a competitive opponent, then that gives you good information. You're like, okay, that should work out. But also it's important to check out the teams. The injuries. Injuries play an important part. There's less injuries at the beginning of the season, but later in the season, the injuries accumulate, and some teams are just crippled, and they don't have the depth. So some teams, like teams at the top, like Ohio State, they have a lot of depth. So the injuries don't affect them as much. Whereas some other teams, they don't have as much depth and the injuries affect them. So injuries are very important to research. So the basic premise here is this. From my observations, this is an important concept. You're not competing against other people who are betting. You're not competing against the public. you're actually not competing on an individual game against a bookmaker on the other side. You're competing against a mathematical methodology. So the mathematical methodology is that over the long run, Vegas wants to basically be roughly 50-50. They would like to win more than they lose, but statistically, they're fine with 50-50 because they get a 5% transaction fee, the juice, off of each transaction. So when they calculate the point spreads, it's based on the methodology based on power ratings. So each team has a power rating, and the power rating is based on the projected point differential, points scored minus points allowed for a given season. So let's say, and so these numbers are projections based on experts. But what happens is once you start playing the games, these numbers may be off, especially in week one. Now, will Vegas make, how much of an adjustment will Vegas make? They could make adjustments, but an adjustment based on a single game will not affect the power ratings proportionately because the power ratings are based on season averages of points scored and points allowed. So they could input the new information from week one into their methodology, but it will be diluted because it's a season-wide average. The point is, so let's say you look at a team and they were an underdog and they cover the point spread and they're not a team that people were paying attention to. It takes a while before that power rating is factoring in that information, and mainly because it's diluted over a 12-game regular season. So a lot of times I'll hear people talking about the markets because they're using a stock market analogy, but it's not exactly right because in the stock market, the price is actually set by the buyers and sellers of the stocks. So it can fluctuate and it reflects an opinion of investors. However, with the point spreads in college football, it's not a representation of the market. It's actually not directly. It's a representation of a mathematical methodology based on projections of season point differentials. So what I'm trying to say is this is theoretically, if you're able to find a team that's overrated or rated significantly, it will take multiple games before those numbers make an adjustment. I'll give an example. Last year, I noticed that SMU, against several competitive teams, they were covering the point spread not by a lot. So that told me two things. One is that the Vegas power rating for SMU was off, and it was off by a lot. And it was occurring. They were covering the point spread multiple weeks by a large number. That's showing you that the power rating was not adjusting rapidly enough to reflect their true quality. So as we go through this process in the regular season, some teams may come out as being severely overrated or underrated, and that's because that once they make the power ratings in the summer, and also there's a lot of unknowns in the college football offseason. It takes a while for when a team is really off or the power rating is really off, that discrepancy will carry over for multiple weeks. So again, check in the description box below where you will see the links to the two spreadsheets. I'll also include other resources in the description box below. So in this channel, my interests are sports, stock market, technology, artificial intelligence, and applying that to solving real-world problems.